Fakesburg. Fakesburg. Hey, everybody. Good evening. Sorry we're late, man. We were having fun in the green room, having pizza and coffee and cigarettes. So anyway, grab your glass of whiskey, your cigar. I'm sorry, I'm using an analogy from a friend. I thought it was really cool. I'm going to be drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. That's going to work for me. Appreciate all you guys. I want to give a shout out to Uncle Ted. Make sure you order one of his hats. It'll come in signed. And also want to say hello and good evening to beautiful Charmaine Nugent as well. Home products of Wildly Wild 21. Check out my friends down there in Texas, fighting hard for America as well. And tonight with me, you can't describe, but no other way. Man with a strong voice, a cigarette, and I love his hat. Jeremy Deeter, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So why don't you tell us about your badass self? Because you're not a real big guy, but your voice is like Bigfoot.
Hey, I appreciate that, man, and I appreciate you having me on tonight, dude.
Oh, hey, it's all about the voice for you, my brother. Honestly, I'm glad you're here too, because it's good to have somebody that has intellectual smarts that can help us diversify what we're going through in America.
Well, I hope that the bar isn't set too high.
I know it is scary when we play stuff like that on ourselves, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I'm just a dad here in Columbus, Ohio. For a good while now, I've been part and parcel to a lot of different kinds of activism and advocating for our natural rights and making a lot of enemies along the way. So I've been labeled a terrorist and investigated by the FBI as a domestic terrorist here in America. So, and I guess they're doing this. They're doing this to a lot of folks. So I'm not alone.
They are. Brother. It comes down. People say to me, Mike, you haven't been on. Yeah. Well, there's reasons why I navigate the way I do. I'm trying. For one, you have to try to stay alive if you want to help. So I go from one source of how I'm going to deliver to another source of how I deliver. I use certain platforms to hide information. Some people may not even be aware what I'm explaining to them when I'm talking about a different topic of narrative. Meanwhile, I am doing the mind control, the mockingbird to everybody by just giving subliminal messages of thought that parallel and correspond to give people information. So they actually get a twofer from me. They can learn about a different topic at the same while I get to bitch it and analyze the system of what's so wrong in America while we're in this America in crisis, because we're every bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. This is occupied America, unfortunately. And I know that people want that to be hyperbole, but it's not. It sucks that this is the case. It may not feel like it because there's a Taco Bell on every corner with a gas station and an Applebee's or whatever. But the fact is we are so far from where we were supposed to be, what we were supposed to be. And everybody is kind of feeling that now, whether they have the knowledge to back it up and say, House Bill this or NDAA that. They can tell you that, look, something is wrong, something is amiss, and they know it by feeling, they know it by lived experience, whether they're paying more for gas or if they just see a society that has gotten dirtier with litter everywhere, but also more drug addicts and more homeless. And this all comes from politicians. This isn't, choices that we've made. We went to work, we've, paid our taxes, and part of that contract is that the government's position is to make sure that we are allowed to pursue our happiness, and now we see so many ways in which we're stifled by doing that, whether it's financial or whatever it is. So I believe that everyone kind of sees where we're at and is feeling a collective sense of a little bit of urgency, possibly.
Right, I agree. We put our trust in man's hands, and we shall never do that again. Not the way that we have, because we've been blindsided by so much and so many despicable acts that are just so toxic to the life and our beliefs of what we could ever have imagined. When you look at this reality that we're in this time now, and how devastating it is, with all the typical scenarios of the facts of everything that everybody already knows out there.
Yeah.
You said a couple things this afternoon that kind of like blew me away, but I want to ask you this. If we were ever to try to just push out a positive method of information to somebody of to keep strong, because I had some things that came back to me out of Texas and so forth, and I'm seeing a lot of crazy stuff going down there. By the way, May 20th, you may see I-90 shut down, because when you can't have a wall, you must be a wall. So how do we promote logically and safely to keep people strong? Because that does worry me. I am seeing a lot of people who were used to come in. Now, maybe they just got tired of Michael Anthony's voice and his analogy of things, because I question everything and I question everyone. And I think that's a fair analogy to do in life, especially after what we just saw, what we learned. What would you say to the people that do listen to us to keep them more on our page, within our page, in our book, as we write this and change our history?
So for me, if people are feeling the stress and the tension of these times, good. That means you're dealing in reality. However, you are always being pushed, and your brain is always being hardwired to deal in one side of that reality. So let's just look at everything and be realistic. And if it's very bad, then let's say that it's very bad. As we have seen a liberal, so-called liberal push, which is a globalist push, to change our culture and financial systems and everything else, we've also seen the blowback of the creation of things like Turning Point with Charlie Kirk, right? This had never been invented, and now you have where Charlie did the smart thing and went right for the younger generation that was right around his age and said, no, we have a conservative voice as well. And this is now listed as conservative, which used to be democratic in this country, which is so weird. But they've turned everything on its head, which kind of tells you this might be a game to some of these people. But you also have the likes of Dan Bongino. You also have the likes of Ben Shapiro. You also have the likes of Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity. None of these people were voices when the Patriot Act was written. We didn't know these people. We'd never heard of these people. Bongino was still working for the Secret Service at that point. Right. And, so now we have all of these voices of opposition. Well, it's not just that. The Kyle Rittenhouse case, the good side won. You know what I mean? That the Constitution was preserved and maintained as a living document in that case. Look at the Michigan case here recently with 2 verdicts that say not guilty. Once again, when the FBI, when the defense's closing argument to the jury is, then he ends it with, do not allow the FBI to do this, and send them a message that says we will not live in this kind of an America. And they bring back 2 acquittals and 2 not guilties. They're telling you, they're saying, I believe that's the case. So right. Truth is winning out. The patriotic narrative is winning out. Look at what happened with the guy from January 6th. He was just let out. The judge was shown the video where the cop let him in the building. He said, take him home, send him home. It's over for him. So you are still seeing movements. What about Tom McDonald and his music? He outright says that the government is coming for the patriotic Americans in one of his most famous released songs. What about Adam Calhoun? What about all these voices now, New Breed? And so it's in the music. It's in politicians like Jim Jordan. It's in rulings in the courts. So, ladies and gentlemen, by far, you have not lost everything. You have not. Right. What you have been subjected to is something that has never been seen before through modern technological means, where people have had to sustain themselves through the most polarizing, inundative quality of propaganda that has ever been. They took it from the Nazis, they refined it, they made it better, they applied technology, and now they inundate you with it, with billboards, magazines, and radios and televisions and school curriculum, apparently. So now, but look at you, man. I mean, look at me, look at us, all the people listening, all the people that this will reach. It didn't work. Trillions of dollars and generations of our wealth, and it still didn't work. We're still here. We do not believe them. We do not listen to a damn word they have to say. We don't care that they talk about us the way that they do and label us to be terrorists. Well, guess what? Sam Adams, Paul Revere, Sam's cousin, everybody, they were terrorists too. And if that's who I am, if that's what I am, that's an incredible honor. The fact that I stood up against a tyrannical government and you would align me with heroes like that. Are you on Hunter Biden's crack? What are you doing, dude? You're making people more than what they actually are by pressing charges and running investigations when, just exactly like the founders, man. They're like, dude, what? Like, they're investigating me for what? Here we are. So it's ridiculous the time that we live in, and we have to recognize that and deal in that reality. But there is the other side of that coin that says, do you see this? Voices like Candace Owens. You know what I mean? We've never even heard of these people 10 years ago. We had no idea who these people were. You have industries that are being started. Look at Ben Shapiro's company. They're going to start. They put $100 million investment towards kids that can now no longer have to be taught CRT and how to hate America and hate themselves if they're white and all of this. They've. I mean, you see it. It's happening, and they're the ones. It was this opposition that came out, and they were so ridiculous and so over the top and always playing their hand that has now created these number of opposition industries, and I could go on with all of the things that are positive. Think about all of the t-shirts that are being sold that are patriotic. You know what I mean? We have, our movement has propped up 4 industries alone, from alternative media to t-shirts. You know what I mean? We just aren't allowed to give ourselves credit or recognition. But the FBI would not spend all of this money in the courts and everything else trying to put us away if we were not a threat. They are scared to death of the day that we realize, 1, we've been screwed by them. 2, it's time for all of us to put a stop to it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Well said. Well, opening. Great opening, brother. No, honestly, and I agree with you. It's everything that you said that makes a difference. And part of the bandwagon, though, that jumps in is I don't trust all the integrity of some. And it's because where were they, like you said, when the Patriot Act and all these other certain forms of information were coming out, being placed. There was no reporting on them, no warnings to the American people, but it doesn't mean that we're down and out. I've always said that we have a strength in America, and it just might be a little bit different from what everybody analyzes or wants to create an analogy for. But if you stay strong, and I've always pushed this the best I can, whether it was being healthy, being logical, read what you're putting into your body, read what you're putting into your mind because of this creative mind vaccination system in the media and more that we tolerate and live with. But the fact is that they have to come back every day. This vaccination through the media has to come back every day because we do win every day. There's something that we won every day that makes them have to come back and push a new narrative to start more shit. And that's just how it works with these their infatuation of how they can take our control of our bodies, our minds, our systems, our military, our family, our children, our educational systems, our gasoline prices, the food shortage, phantoms. I get mail that's mind blowing at times, but people have their own thought, their own concerns of interest. And I try to explain, and I wish I would. I'm going to actually have to write everything down that you said in your opening, and I'm going to have to type that into everybody when they ask me the questions, because it goes that well. And I hope this goes worldwide somehow. But I can tell you this: we will get out there, we will be heard. Sorry, not to take us out of this frequency of energy, because it's there and it'll be there. Before coming on, we were talking about some of these other systems and placements of history repeating itself and all this, this long-term plan, lockstep, 100 years, 75 years, whatever, this big plan to get us into this reality of sequences of kill the vibration of America, because America's not America unless it's occupied like we did when Japan occupied China or China occupied Japan. You saw it on their pottery. You saw the labeling of the dates that made it, and it made it more collectible. So who would you say is actually occupying the United States?
I would say that, and I'm quoting somebody else's term here, that it is an international rootless cabal. They have no allegiance to any culture, land, or people. And that's who.
Okay. Okay. So you might be speaking in reference to the term of some of the most powerful over in Ukraine, a certain mafia.
I believe that these folks are worldwide. I believe that they are international, and because
I think they had that growth. They grew that growth. That was part of the infiltration.
If you look at like the way that at one point in time the leader of Russia, England, and Scotland were all related, then you go through a Habsburg's monarchy, you go through the Queen of Scots, you go through, now looking at present day England, and it's all Nazi regime, and you start to see that power really is concentrated in just a very few hands. Jekyll Island meetings are not that hard to imagine. It actually makes a lot of sense. So if I can just break this down real quick, man.
Go ahead, man.
Say you're a billionaire, and so am I, and we got 4 other people on here, and they're all billionaires, and the chances that all of us have received extortion threats and threats to kidnap our children, to hold them for ransom, and the chances that those things actually happen and never make the news, all of that's reality. Okay, you have billions of dollars. They don't actually want to kill your kid. They just want some of your money. And they're not going to kill the kid. And this is what happens. So, because they have to live a different life, right? They can't shop where we shop. You never know where there's somebody out there, that's going to recognize them, or somebody who's just waiting for them to be in the public eye. They're no longer safe, and they have to view public as a bunch of rabid animals at some point. They have to remove their wealth, their opulence. It has to remove them from a society, because now they're in danger. Now they're no longer safe. And so what it means is that you and myself and these other 4 people, we have to run in our circles only. And we're the only people that really understand the struggles of what it is to be an industry leader, or the leader of a nation state, that is having to deal with, multiple other industry heads and things like this. What are you going to do? You're going to go down to the commoners and try to talk to them about international commerce and the things that you have to deal with. The struggles aren't the same. Our lives reflect each other in no way. They never have, ever since before there was royalty that was running things. This is the nature of human hierarchy. This is the natural compartmentalization that is a necessity for people to be able to survive within their classes. And in the United States, we were never supposed to have class separation. That's directly diametrically opposed to the constitutional belief of all of us being created equally and having equal protections. And we tried. This nation tried, and what happened was prosperity and the inability to stay vigilant, because it wasn't difficult for moral people to look around and have a reasonable expectation of morality from their neighbors. And as it turned out, some of their neighbors were getting ready to assassinate Abraham Lincoln, and some of their neighbors are not just more than willing in 2022 to betray a nation. They would watch it burn with so many tears of joy they wouldn't be able to see straight. This has been evidenced time and again, but I could recently use the Michigan Whitmer kidnapping plot as an example, where one of the confidential human sources has an actual herniated stomach goes to the guys, has everyone look at his disgusting herniated stomach and says, the VA, I'm a veteran and the VA will not give me treatment for this. Had some of the guys calling him dad. You have no idea that what the, and I'm not, that's not all of it. One of them gave me a story about how the cops had his 62-year-old handicapped wife covered in red dots, and it was never true. You know, these folks, they will do everything to betray you. You were talking about trusting people or not. And my thing is I trust everybody, right? I trust everyone. It's just, how do I trust them? Do I trust them to screw me over? You know, because some people you can trust 100% to screw you over. You can trust people to lie. You can trust people to control and manipulate. And if you're going to be a patriot and a public speaker as well, then you know everybody is going to smile to your face. But some of them are the snakes that smile before they bite you. So treat everyone the same.
The serpent always comes into the picture.
Imagine that.
it really does. And now we're talking about venoms. I don't know how much you've been schooled recently on that, you know, and the educational part that's coming down out of that scenario. But it'll be an eye opener to the ones that haven't been informed on it yet. I'll leave that to some better virologists.
Cobra water?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the Cobra water?
Well, some people refer to it by name like that.
Yeah. So, you know, listen, this is simple. Your government, by the admission of our very own government employees that are shown as to be government employees, they are who they say they are. We're telling everybody that on 9/11, America was responsible for killing 3,000 people. Before that, it was the Tuskegee experiments that they did. Before that, it was the east side of St. Louis. And in the 1956, before all of that, it was Canton, Ohio's water supply.
Yeah.
To think for a second that Venom couldn't, or some other, any kind of poison, anything, that they wouldn't use the water supply when you've already seen a world sickness go around that doesn't make any damn sense. How could anybody rule that out? That's what I want to know. Like, I'm not saying it's the case, but when it comes to probability, this is the same government that everyone wants to complain about Russia, right? And how they quiet political dissenters. Are you kidding me? Russia can't hold a candle to their government, and the way that they've quieted political dissent all around the world. All around the world, in their own country, and in South America, and in the Middle East, and in Australia, and every damn where. That's 101 in the CIA playbook. You know, you go into home environment dynamics for special warfare, and they say there's 5,000 people, and you need to split them up to 2,500 and 2,500. Use their cultural beliefs to do so. Use religious beliefs to do so. Divide them. Get them to fight each other. And then when your 500 troops can go in because both sides have weakened each other so badly, you can just go in and rule the day. The thing is the American people, we're not stupid, man. Like, we get treated like we are, and the media talks like we are, but, you know, whatever, dude, because we believe in the possibility of being poisoned on a mass scale. Don't care if it's snake venom. Don't care what it is. We believe in that possibility, and it is not because we're all on the fringe of society, right? I'm a father of 4 beautiful daughters, all of them much more intelligent than myself, of course. And these are people that I care about dearly. So my investment in them has to do, and has to run parallel as a parent with honesty. I have to tell them, you know, that you live in a time where we cannot trust our government. And if they come to me and say, well, what about water with snake venom in it? I have to tell them at the very least, you know, after I tell them to discern for themselves, research it, look it up, tell me what you believe, and then we'll go through what you believe, and we can critically think this together. I have to tell them that the possibility exists to validate her going and researching it, right? So that honesty that says, I can't take it out of the realm of possibility, baby. I really can't. I'm sorry. I wish I could, but I feel like we live in a crazy time, and I'm not trying to cause fear. I just want you to know that, you know, we're in a bad time right now, you know.
And that's so very delicate too. So, you know, as a father here, as a father to you there, I mean, you know, I know what you're going through, and the thing is this, though, it's the best education we could share back to our children. by giving them the facts of reality and truth. And if we have enemies in the world, they should know about them.
Yes.
If we have case scenarios of believing the unbelievable, such as what you just described on different levels, then we have to show them. We have to enlighten them because they are our future. They will learn from it. They will become much smarter. In the meantime, we can only do the best we can with everything that it surrounds us that puts us in this placement.
Being an American parent in 2022 means that you have to choose between how and when your child is desensitized as much as can be at your own discretion. So do you desensitize them with Disney? Do you desensitize them with YouTube? Do you allow those things? Well, what about public schools? And what about being on social media? And are you going to force them to be a leper of society by not allowing them to take part? Or, do you have, the ability to tell them, listen, I'm going to allow you to be exposed to this, but let's do this together. Let's make it make sense, because there can be a lot of bad in the world. There really can.
You're right. And again, everything that the children need, desire to have, even us as people, just to want to get a laugh out of something on TV. You find yourself, I find myself now, because I was awaiting to these things. I mean, I've been doing this for 47 years of a huge platform of different things. But, I would look at things and say, you can never look at them the same way twice, because there's a message behind everything you look at. There's wording behind everything you look at. There's symbolism behind everything you look at. There's direction behind everything you look at. And of course, the final worst thing, the conditioning to come for everything you're about to look at. And I feel terrible for the kids of America and the parents of America who have younger children, kindergarten through 12. And I think, and even when they're in the 12th grade, you're still a damn child. Listen to your parents. There's logic here. We need to analyze. You need to analyze and focus. I know I'm not talking to no children here, but it's purposeful that we do this and create this structure of information for everybody that won't compromise their train of thought, but let them compromise what they see as true reality versus the lies that are implied within all these typical messages that get fed through music and Hollywood and all the other concerns that we have, as well as just some of the bills in government that are out there to nail us to the wall, that they stay alert to them, that they learn. It's almost like we have to put our children through a homeschooling education where they have to start to understand law. They have to understand health. I mean, a child needs a childhood. And I mean, well, that's the way we theorize it, right? I mean, you would think we want them to have values of Easter and Christmas and Halloween and just fun, being a child, that innocence that forms a person. And I think gives them better substance and structure for when they grow up. But now we're caught between this catch-22, like within like everything that exists that you would want to watch on The Nightmare on Elm Street. You have to teach them a whole different format of life and living. And we have these great adjustments that we need to make as well that'll help them infiltrate themselves into a system that's always going to remain after this point of where we are now into the future of America, where we question everything, we question everyone on every typical topic. Even Donald Trump has changed some of his rally statements and given more strength. And I'm not dogging Donald. I'm not dogging you, Mr. President. Give me 10 minutes with you, though. But anyway, just give me 10 minutes with you. But the truth is, I do have some serious questions, and I think some other people do as well. But I do understand that he's coming more on board, and he's opening up a few more ideas for us to look upon. He is starting to share more as strength is becoming power of this. We can win this war against them as long as we stay strong and never become impenetrable of our mindset and our mind thought of how we can make this America come back in a stronger way. And, it's going to be very difficult from whatever platform we pick it up from, at whatever point we pick it up from. They have destroyed America. There's no doubt about it. This new world ovary system, or whatever you want to call these bunch of pussycats out there in the world that have this. I don't even know how these people can go home and look at their own family, sit across from tables And if I was a father to somebody that was in governmental office, and I'm sitting here with my thought, I mean, I don't know. I bring that up because you said they can't even come out into the public eye anymore.
So
what kind of life is that?
Well, it's not much of one, but when you have all of that money, power, clout, and influence, you get on your private jet, you go out to so and so's palace, and you're or Epstein's island, I guess, and they live that kind of a life. It's away from everybody, and it's very extreme. And understanding kind of the construct of human nature, you could see where evil could take hold of people and just make them run wild and do incredibly evil things.
That's why we are where we are. The weakness
Absolutely.
of the buck, the weakness
Absolutely.
of the dollar. It got to everybody, and they sold us freaking so far on into the dirt. It's pathetic. I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I mean, it's right. We come from a structure. You were talking about symbology and things, and that's important because before there was a written language, every language was all symbols. Well, then as you started to get like cuneiform, and then you started to get Sanskrit, and you started to get other written languages, and things were no longer just being carried through oral tradition, the sacred knowledge immediately, was things like the lifeboat, these old symbols that stood for many, many things. Well, it's 2000 years later, and the governments, and this is how that this is absolutely the case. The governments are the ones that have the archaeological knowledge. They're the ones that send the archaeologists from the universities that are on government funding. But before that, nobody searched for a relic or a treasure that wasn't sent by some type of governmental commission, or a king's or a queen's commission. Whether they were looking for the spear of destiny, the spear that had pierced Jesus' side, or Solomon's ring that he used to control demons and build Solomon's temple, these were all financed by governments. So it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what I believe. Governments for a very long time have believed in the pursuit of these relics and artifacts. They also believe in holding the ancient knowledge to make sure that they always have a position of power. We have to remember, it was the churches that disseminated literacy and taught people spelling and how to cast a spell. And
didn't language actually come from the was it called the hermetics, something like that? That's where language came from, the power of words, where it was first developed. When we go into the ancient text and writings, that's where all indications come from. I think it was pronounced. I'll think of it.
I don't know. You're probably right. Yeah, I don't know. I know that the written language was incredible technology, and that language then made it to where we were not just using sacred tones and utterances to communicate with one another. Now we were starting to formulate what we would later call sentences. And this then became the opus for our ideas. And then our ideas, this is why people today, I guess, say words matter. Those ideas became constructs for how to build, and not just build things, but how to build social constructs, right? This was, I could write down, I love you to a woman that I thought was beautiful now, where, this really meant something. This was incredible. Frederick Douglass, an American slave that taught himself how to read by stealing bread from his slave master's kitchen, going outside to the homeless children, the homeless white children, and saying, I'll bet you a piece of this bread that you don't know how to say this word right here. And he'd be showing him the newspaper that he was told to throw away. And the little kid would look at him, tell him the word, and then the kid was starving. So, Frederick would give him a piece of bread. He understood that communication in this way is absolutely imperative to success. Now look at what they've done in 2022. We're way past Ebonics, right? We have destroyed a beautiful language by the sponsorship of government. And language takes a very long time to construct. This is something that should be held precious. Etymology is an absolutely beautiful art and way of engineering. And our syntax, our ability to think and put thought into motion or emotion is what makes us a sentient being. It's what makes us a better being, and it also is what helps us to use to preserve our freedom. They know this. So when pharmakia used to be spelled with a K and now everything's a C, there's a reason for that. There's a reason why the symbols that you see, why when you walk up to a courthouse, especially in the Midwest, you go through a series of 3 and then 5 and then 7 and then 3 steps. You're being communicated to by Masons.
Yes.
You're looking at it's all around you, but they've not told you. And it seems very petty. It seems very childish. It seems very stupid that our own species would do this to us, where they're, communicating right in front of us. But because they never told us that there was even a whole nother language to look for. This is very immature. It's very very school boy clubhouse kind of thing, because we can't expect better from them. When we think about it, let me segue myself and interrupt myself again. I'm sorry, and then I'll be done. When we think about an adversary, when we think about these people that have put all of these constructs and constraints on us, ladies and gentlemen, they're scared to death of you, because they are not what we've been led to believe. We actually have to conform to the stupid things that they say. We actually have to submit, and we have to do it from the top down. And they're scared to death of us. Winston Churchill was right. He talked about the tiny mouse of truth, right? He said, and this was in his time, he said that the international group of the Axis to the Allies, they were so afraid of a tiny mouse of truth. And then he was real controversial and likened it to old English royalty. But look at what they do today. They micromanage individual accounts in the vastness of the internet, in this global World Wide Web. They have found a way to micromanage down to the individual patriot accounts and give them all kinds of hell like petty children, to see if they don't come back, and to suspend their account and put them in timeout, because these people do not know what it is to be adults. They have no idea. They have no idea how to treat other adults as adults. They have no idea how to treat themselves as adults. And they constructed this beautiful and incredible invention, and they're so small-minded. They did it to exert control and to rule over people. And
separations in languages and more. I'm sorry. I thought you were at your end there, but
no, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
But you brought up, the separation in languages and hidden symbols and different scenarios of how they build and construct. It's only taught to a certain class of people. It may have something to do with Harvard, Yale, Skull and Bones, where you do learn the Masonic signs. And look at the top of all buildings. There's a sign for everybody at the top. I guarantee it. It's not because you see these beautiful lights. We have this beautiful skyscraper in Pittsburgh. It used to have red, blue, and white, and they would have one color up for a great sunny day, blue if it was going to rain. Now we have the colors of the rainbow. So that right there is look up. Look at the symbology of and the power of words and the analogy of focus. Only certain people are really awakened enough to realize the construct of this. Jordan Maxwell was the king when it came to symbology and the analogy of the explanation. When you brought up a couple other things where words are power, and I've always said that 2 years ago, I told everybody this was going to happen. And I swear, go back and listen to my stuff, man. You'll be like, and I'm not a prophet. It was just an analogy like we're doing right here, right now, of trying to weigh out what the infractions are versus the good additions. I'll just put it that way, with a brain fog. But you had the Tower of Babylon, or whatever they call. Pretty sure it was called the Tower of Babylon. They couldn't have it get built to the sky. And they said, well, how do we ever stop this from happening again? Because the height of a building had an importancy of power. And we can't let the people have that importancy. So they destroyed it, and they took language from them. They created barriers. They separated people so they couldn't communicate to figure out how to rebuild it again, or how to take on something of a construct of that magnitude, because of what ancient history and some of the facets of what it meant versus building pyramids. And our histories bring us through all this rambunctious bullshit of what they stand for. And there's symbolizations of bloodlines, marrying royalty. I'm just trying to catch back up on everything you brought up. It's a little hard because you talk a lot of stuff, but no, and actually it makes my mind work better. But no, when you look at these things, it's truth and power, bloodlines, biblical. It's a construct of who they are. But the truth is, there's not many of them. There's more of us. But they're searching. Ancestry.com was the first part. We talked in the green room about this. A part of the project of how they were going to figure out who was interested in their ancestry. Well, everybody wants to know a little bit. Nobody ever thought, a majority, nobody would have thought that they were going to take our DNA samples and do sequences from them for future testing for C1, you know the number, and the other things as far as who had certain bloodlines, traits of royalty. They wanted to be part of them. And some people reflect that even in as far back as they call themselves the Nephilim. This is where they all think they come from, part of their answer. Well, you know, my thought is this. What happened to them? When you come up with it, yeah, they were here before as the Nephilim, biblically speaking. Then the Rephilim. They were the ones hereafter. And you saw a decrease in size and structure and stability and strength. And then normality started, an extinction hit. We can extinct them the same way they extinct themselves, because they did it then. It will happen again, because you can't put yourself to cannibalism against people. People will fight back. The Indians proved it. When they were attacked, being eaten by these giants, they took them out. And that's where I stand with that part of it. I hope that made some sense, giving a little history, narrating around a few of the things that you said, also bringing people up into the realization of 2021, 2022.
Yeah, I think that our government, if nothing else, has a written history, a documented history, a digital history, an oral history of, if nothing else, making sure that we know very little about the truth. And it could be the truth about a mob hit. It could be the truth about what's written in all three of the ancient Indian epics. You know, it could be Nazi history. It could be anything. And we've seen their propensity to want to do that with information. They believe in, this government believes in censorship, and it has for quite some time. This is also obviously directly against the tenets of the United States Constitution and the premise of where we derive all of our freedom. We are an anti-censorship nation. And, you know, so when you see that there's the power structure working counterintuitively and counterproductively to all of your means, all of your cultural identifiers, then you see that this is an enemy presence. And historically, you'll see that this is what happens. People want to control people. Over time, this is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
We're 240 years into being this grand experiment, and it's probably time for America to now do a couple of things. We've exerted our influence over the world. Let's go ahead and pull on back out of the world. Let's come on back home. Let's mind our own business. Let's clean up our own backyard. And there's nothing wrong with America minding her own damn business. There's nothing wrong with America taking a good look at herself and saying, what do I need to clean up here in my yard? And if you're doing something somewhere else in the world, well, you know, check it out. Evil exists, man. And so does good, you know, and it's not our business. We're not the world police. We're not the world, police, basically. We're not, you know, whatever it is that you're doing in Ecuador, El Salvador, Somalia, whatever it is you're doing, I hope that you are finding a way to find peace, you know. But America needs to look after her own interests, and you'll see this natural progression of power that will not concede itself, showing more and more of its hand and its motivations. And you'll see more and more opposition to it, and America will get less and less stable. And they'll try to lie again when something big happens, and it won't work. And instead of this being Sarajevo or another place, America is going to show that we vastly, all of us, the ones that want to see this nation prosper and have its people live with a chance at civil morality, being able to pursue their own happiness, we are going to surprise even ourselves when we show how many of us there are to each other. We're going to question each other. Why did we wait so long? Like, what were we waiting for?
Yeah.
You know,
man, I keep saying that to everybody. That's why, the best thing you can do is promote strength to everybody. I always try to do that. I want to bring something up to you, though, because it would fit part of what you're saying. And part of what I want to say is 2022 is so important. And we can let history repeat itself over and over and over. And it had. In the early days, Dominion, because there is an important factor here about Dominion. I guess he went MIA for a minute.
No, I'm here. I just had to turn off the camera for a second.
It's all good, brother. It's all good. I just thought you disappeared. I'm like, oh, God, I went through this last night. No, never. It's all good. So what was Dominion years ago? Well, the politicians called the mob because the mob ruled the construction, and everybody used the politicians for construction to happen, and everybody had their hand on it, and that's part of the corruption of how politics works with business. Everybody has to have their hands in because it's an open format of stock and money and wealth, and they all want in on it. Well, at least the old system. We have to create a new system with boundaries and a whole new legislation of law to stop this type of corruption. But you have to remember, in the early days, they put JoJo at the door, and JoJo said, "Hey, how you doing?" And Joe would come up, "I'm doing good." He's, "Well, hey man, who you voting for?" "Well, no, you're not. You're voting for this. This is our guy. This is who you vote for. I mean, if you didn't go in and vote for this guy, the Dominions would take you out on the side of the building and kick your ass." So the voting systems have always been controlled, but that was just another narrative that people take on to the facet, but which, by the way, was Donomia, Dominion. How do you like that? So it's fabulous how they come up with symbologies, words, and meanings, but it's true. So this facet's so big that we have to fight. And you said we have to clean up our own backyard. So, well, this is one way of doing it. However, these controllers of what works for them is money and people's weakness to have success. And they accept it on any level. They don't think twice that, okay, it's benefiting my pocket right now and it's going to kill theirs, but me, I'm more important right now. I want to live in the biggest house on the block. That's why we saw the structure of America, blood, sweat, and tears, building all these homes. And then every once in a while, out of order, you had to see the biggest house here or the biggest house there. And to me, that was from the blood, sweat, and tears of America, the true builders of this country, the ones that are right now being attacked again by this corruption of the system that we have. Though you can call it from ancient times all the way up until now. That's the existence of what we've all had to endure and had to realistically put up with. And I don't know why that we failed in the past, because I do think in the past, even our parents, there's a level in every generation that a wave had come and someone had fought about it. Even Jim Morris's own father. Now, this is going off and the part of the unknown, but a lot of people didn't know this. Jim Morrison did a song called The Lizard King because it's something that his father was involved in a government, and he was in a government UFO program. But a lot of people don't know that. Same with Iron Butterfly. So there's a relationship to everything. there's a tie to everything and everyone that of everything that's ever been introduced to the American people by far. It's a placement, just like that. I can't think off the top of my head his name. Well, you got to forgive me on the age part here. But the goofball come out and said, we have our young generation now ready and planted and waiting. I can't think of his name. I can see his ugly face in my head, but I can't think of his name. But he made a public announcement to that fact. And now we have public announcements to people. And I think you mentioned this afternoon about guns and we must take from people. You made some type of comment. And I was like, well, that wasn't part of what I heard, but it was something that just happened last night about a retaliation to the people. We the people of America on guns and certain things. I can't remember exactly all that you included into that, but that kind of blew me away because I missed that. I guess it was on last night and you picked it up.
I believe it was last night. When I read it this morning, I was still waking up, and I just kind of ran on the assumption, I think, that it was when they finished last night. Because that was a special hearing for small arms, and this had to do with all of the countries that are bringing small arms to Ukraine are now claiming that they are running out of firearms to send.
Right.
And that makes zero sense. That's one of the stupidest things they could possibly. But there's a reason for it. I mean, there's a reason they're saying that. Now
Yeah.
I don't know what that reason is, but there is a reason for it. And the United Nations, just they're at their wits' end with the American gun owner, man. They're like, look, when there's a war theater, guns are going to be in it, but otherwise, no population on Earth should be so heavily armed. And they're talking about the proliferation of the United States gun owners.
Yeah, right. And then I think what they want to do is try to do everything they can to deplete our military of our tax dollar that we have invested into our safety. The measurements of the weaponry that we need to protect our borders, which we don't have. And by the way, if you haven't heard me say this, honk for freedom. And while you're honking for freedom, if you can't be the wall, get to Texas, and if you can't have the wall, get to Texas and be the wall. These are the things that we can do to stand out strong. But yeah, okay. So that was just one analogy. Here's another thing. I don't know if you heard about this though. Just to bring up on a short note, 24 of our naval vessels they want to take out of active duty for no apparent reason. It's $3.5 billion a year that's wasted money. Well, I'd rather have $3.5 billion wasting our money to protect our borders than give it to these other countries because the UN was going in, starting wars, taking over and taking control of these other countries. And that's how they, and within the process, have created this global unitement of what we're seeing. Part of it. You have even Hillary's cousin and family members are involved in it. And look at so many of these people who suicidal deaths, of course, always and forever will always be that way, of everywhere their hands have been tied into, where the construct of control was necessary.
So there are some things that really give that a lot of context. The decommissioning of the 24 naval vessels include submarines with warfare capability to hit something that is 400 miles inland with pinpoint accuracy. They're wanting to decommission these vessels while China's getting ready to invade Taiwan, and we should be anyway at a heightened threat level around the world with the invasion of Ukraine. And the way that affects not just the world oil market, but the grain as well. Most Americans aren't going to know this, not because they're stupid, but because we do not follow Russian politics commonly, so that you don't find a whole lot of translations. And the very first time that Vladimir Putin, if you remember, he actually took Russia. And then once it was somewhat stabilized, he explained how a voting democracy works and, ran for president and got the presidency. And he campaigned on destroying the American oil economy and destroying OPEC. And that was one of the big things that got him voted in. And as far as like campaign wise. And so this is something that Russia wants. The Russian people want this, as well as the Russian government. Well, why is that? Why would they want to harm, that agreement that has gone on so successfully for the U.S.? Well, because the people that are getting all of the money from the oil are Saudi oil interests that are basically allowed to live carte blanche however they want and do whatever they want. When was the last time you heard about Saudi Arabia on the news for, some human rights violation?
Oh, never. Not really.
Yeah,
I mean, there's been things, but I mean, yeah, so far and few in between.
Yeah, and this is a place that Sharia, Muslim law, is enforced everywhere, government buildings, private buildings, the streets, everywhere. So there might be a human rights violation, and Russia, sees that. They see that this is the criminality that the U.S. is taking part in, and they want to destroy it. And so a lot of the lies that we're constantly told about Russia, they're the big bad boogeyman and all of this, it's just as true as saying we need to start a war on drugs, and you never once investigate the Central Intelligence Agency for all of the heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, and other drugs that they've brought into this country and have done so for generations. I can't imagine why the American people feel betrayed.
Yeah, they used our own military. The implants were everywhere. They knew what was going on. There's movies out there. I don't know if it was Denzel Washington or one of them actually partaked in one of these movie events that was on years ago that told the whole true story of how they were doing it and bringing heroin into the United States. And it was through our own resources and our government and our military. So that's how deep the evidence goes. And getting back to us talking about the faculties of oil and so forth, I really think that they thought that Biden and the United Nations filtrating the preparations of killing all the executive orders, Keystone Pipeline, and all these different narratives by closing them down. But hats off to BLM right now for putting the land leases back up. And no, I'm not talking about the 3 bitch queens by any means. I'm talking about Bureau of Land Management. Okay. They also may have something to do and may have a lot of knowledge about national parks and what lies within them. And that's why you can't enter into certain zones, kind of like the no-fly zone in the Antarctic. But these are facts. These are facts. So, all right, Putin's all in. So if we get Putin the oil, he's going to jump aboard with us, and then here Putin stabs them all in the back and says, no, I'm a man of my own country. I'm a man of my own means. And maybe he's a man of a friend that we know and has a different ideology. What are your thoughts that way on it, on the percent?
So, again, I talked about earlier, the leaders of England, Scotland, and Russia were all related. And this is to say that a lot of things are a game, and a lot of this shifting back and forth and a lot of this polarization, the polarizing talk it's a show. It's not real. And I'll explain it like this. So Vladimir Putin reforms the BRICS nations, and everyone's supposed to be upset about this. But if you remember, let's go back to World War I and what actually happened that Americans seem to be delightfully unaware of at times. Right before bombs dropped, because America and the USSR at the time were talking a whole bunch of schmack to each other. And then right before bombs dropped, what does Russia do? Oh, never mind. We're friends. We're good. We're not enemies of the U.S. World War II, what happens? Right? We're talking schmack. And then who were the 2 countries that ended up racing into Germany, one from the north, one from the south, that were allied countries? The United States and Russia. So Russia is not our enemy. They never have been. They are friends with all of our enemies, and we are friends with all of their enemies, and we both play both sides of the fence and share intel. Yeah. That's the way it is. On the highest of levels, that's what I believe. I absolutely believe that. So
Russia.
You know what I mean? You got to have
Who's
a
not
boogeyman.
Ashley Babbitt?
Well, think about this.
No,
So,
everything I'm bringing up is exactly what you said. Putin was the one making these questions. It's because you're right. They're playing both sides of the fence. They're not
yeah,
stupid people. But what they're doing is they're looking out for a certain
group there. And
yeah.
we have every bit of evidence to show that more so than anything, Russia could only ever be our ally, right? By their by not by our discernment, but by Russia's, right? Their population was decimated. People don't realize this. Between Stalin and World War II and everything, Russia's population was decimated, and there is a such thing as the Putin youth, and it's
Yeah.
because they have no numbers. So the youth for Russia had to have a place to come together for the kids that were Christian Orthodox, and that's not what they tell you, because you do have some other kids there, not many, but they're in the Russian Mafia, they're in gangs, there's different things going on. The Orthodox Russian Christians that wanted to carry on Russian culture called themselves the Putin Youth because they were all fans of what he was doing with Russia. He was changing everything that had ever been done. And he was showing them, like, listen, you guys don't even need to live under all of this restriction. We don't have our own food. We've never actually produced enough food for Russia to feed Russia ever. And, he tried to get the Russian people to do it, and they didn't want to. And he said, okay, fine. I'll just call in the Americans, and they can bring you some of their food. And all of a sudden, the Russians were showing up to government offices looking for farming subsidiaries to learn how to farm. David Duke goes to Russia. Nobody likes him. He's a white supremacist. That's not why Russia wanted him there. They knew that he was a farmer, and he knew industrial farming. He shows up, starts to tell them about farming. America knows that this is so serious. They have the embassy call David Duke and tell him, your passport's been revoked. You have to come home now. When he got here, he was told that it was because he was exposing national security secrets, teaching the Russian people how to feed themselves.
Right. Right.
You don't have to like or dislike David Duke. Think about that. Think about what that really means. That's unreal.
Yeah, well, that's part, I think, of what we'll be fighting here as well, but with a different narrative of certain fabrics of the government's beliefs and desires to create this global weaponry of climate change and this new ideology of the danger and false narratives of information to get reported out there that solar flares are infecting our atmosphere, killing this and creating that. And I can say this from because you brought up, food and agriculture and things of that nature, because there's meaning behind them. And part of something that you said this afternoon, they don't want us going out resourcing in the suburbs, but at the same time, we shouldn't give up our city homes. We should stand our ground. But while there are people that have no other place to go, they're up there killing their resources, because of the minute the apple blossoms come in, they frost the trees out. Now, how many people can get up there and cover in plastic or spray? And so year after year, and I'm one of those people that has a property up in the mountains. I go up, I do chainsaw wood carving. I would just want to do my thing, watch UFOs, check out Bigfoot, yell down through the canyon, whatever. Year after year of disappointment of a dream that I had in America where I'm going to have this plot of land. And then, now they want to actually put meters on our wells up there. They want to meter our wells, and they'll be electronically controlled as well. They want to have a power resource to them as well. So they're trying to implement all these things that, again, it's a war on the people. It's a different narration of war. And they use these technologies. Right now, we got fires burning out of control already. All right. Yep. Tornadoes in the hundreds. Look, when Texas had that first devastation, I looked into this really hugely, even more, because I've been watching the skies forever, because I would feel it. I would be out in my driveway. I'd feel the sun cooking on me. Oh, it's going to be a great day. And I'd look up and I'd see these lines, and I'm like, man, what the hell'd you go in front of the sun for? Because I would feel the difference, like almost differently. And then you would feel a wind pattern catch. Yeah, I would actually feel it. And I started putting these things together more and more and more. And over the 10 years that I kept studying, calling some people and making friends that are in the towers to tell me the planes are up there and what they're doing and how many are there. You know, we have like 1,500 planes daily in the United States doing this. And what they're doing is they're manipulating the whole jet stream. Now, the jet stream of weather really works by the four oceans. And if there's a disruptance in the four oceans, then there we have a scenario of issue. Then there's a concern. But they don't look at that concern. They don't look at the fact that I've been screaming my lungs out. But hey, Trump finally brought it up, and I was really happy to hear that, that we have islands out in the ocean filled with plastic. I mean, they're the sizes of states. No one cares about that. This administration wants us to go green. Green to the point we have nothing. They kill our vegetables. They kill our livestock. And I don't know if you heard this. It's a matter of importance for people because there's a lot of beef and steak eaters out there. A group of very wealthy people have gotten together with all the cattle ranchers and have now got enough money to open up their own production line for harvesting beef. So
wonderful.
We are doing things on our own. And you're absolutely right to go back to the beginning of this segment where we were talking about how America is winning. I used to say everybody's computer warriors, bangers, you know, and thank God that we have some of them out there keeping us alert with information. We need some of that. But there's also a fabric in America of people who are out there fighting their asses off on all the levels, trying to take care of us, fighting this climate destruction of all these I mean, come on. Nanotubes, nanoparticles. You can take a credit card across your window and use a magnet and see them jump. I mean, we're breathing this stuff in. The animals are ingesting it. I mean, we're going to have to take cover at some point if they keep doing the methods that they're doing because they're going to kill our earth. And that's part of the disruption, another part of the disruption plan. But I'm just cutting in there because of a food analogy and to give some hope so people understand that we do have a faculty of hope, of good people, strong, that they don't know the Kraken is coming. The Kraken is out. All I can say is pay very close attention. Some bombs are really going to drop about the laptop, and not just one, but two other laptops. There's going to be some very important stuff coming. These will be our fights. These will be our informations in the courts. These will be the game changers that will help us even more while we're fighting where we can fight as law-abiding patriot citizens, because right now that's all we have, all we can do until we have a threat at our door. When the threat of the door comes, I hope we're more ready than to just accept the fact that they're there, that we're more ready for that and we stand up stronger. I just want to give you a heads up, let you know a couple things here. April Dawn has been in watching. Joey Too Legit out of Pittsburgh. Hi, brother. He does, huge guy here, man. He does toes for toys for the kids up here. I support him 100%. Charmaine Nugent, Wiley Well, Uncle Ted, how are you? Monty, yeah. So every once in a while we get a few big names in here. Beth McCord's been on, and it's not even letting me adjust my monitor here. But I can tell you this: we've had a very strong group of people in here through the whole evening. I'm sure this is going to get out largely to a lot of people. I know we didn't cover a lot into the unknown, but we are speaking within it. Remember, the theme is there. We have thrown hints out there of history, But remember, history is a very vital factor to what we're seeing, what we're experiencing. Where do you want to go from here, brother? This has been so much fun with you because we could go all over the place and still have great context.
I appreciate it, man. I do. I've appreciated this conversation. I think
I've been waiting to have you on forever. You know, I mean, you're famous and you don't even know it.
Yeah, I guess I don't know it, man. I'm usually just here with the kids, you know. So I don't really do much in my life.
Brother. That's a good dad. You could, you know, you say all the right things. Women are gonna love you. Remember, he's married. Got 4 kids. He's married. That's right.
I'm taking man.
You might like the fact that we're in the same attire tonight. We got our hoodies. We got our hats. We got the white. We need a little red, white, and blue here, man. Just to remind everybody what's going on. We are America. We are America Disclosing Uncensored. Don't ever forget that. We do a bunch of different platforms. Also, we are brought to you by Studio 10 Broadcasting, 10 o'clock talks. A couple different formats on every Friday, America in Crisis. However, I think we covered everything in crisis, except for probably another 100 million things that we just didn't agitate into yet. Where you want to go? Man, we got a little bit of time left if you're good. Only if you're good.
Man. Yeah, no, I'm loving it. I appreciate everybody in the chat. Thank you guys for being here. We know that you could do other things with your life, and you have chosen to be here with us, and it actually means something. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Jeff shared he had a man problem. Whatever the hell that was about. I don't know. Did you get one of those early forms of condoms? They were invented hundreds of years ago. They truly were. So, mate, just saying. I don't know why he brought that up, but hello, Jeff Strong. I hope you get well better. Gary, who's always in. James Wigington. Man, we did a rock show on something that he shared, that he did with me, and we it's kind of like this. We talk a lot of stuff of the unknown theories, but we deep dive into also with directional paranormal, ufology, UFOs, incidents 47, Brazil's 47, just different types of, because everybody's in everything. One of the things that I found out was when I thought, and I truly felt this, bro. I was like, man, where's the people going? Am I saying something wrong? Am I talking too strong? Like I'm this know-it-all. I don't want to be a know-it-all. I want to share good information. I want to help America. I want to help people feel strong and become concerned for the faculties of these issues that we're all within. And there comes times where it's just hard and you have to narrate differently. So where's my numbers going, man? I was like hitting 1,000 in the first hour or this, that. So I went out and I started to look. And I started looking in other groups and I see where my friends' names were. And I'm seeing them. Encounters with Bigfoot, UFOs. So I'm like, wow, they're still here. They're just tired. They're focusing elsewhere. Everybody needs that break. Well, let me break into that realm. And I did. And now I'm bringing, but you know what? The fact is this. They're there. I'm finding them. They're finding me. They're coming back. New people are coming back. New people are finding us. It's a new format, almost of a whole new method of different people, different names. I'm starting to see old come back. I'm starting to see more new come in. And to me, that's saying that what I do, how I do it, may not be the best way to look at it or how to construct it. But it is working because honestly, I thought we were apart for a while there, or maybe it was just my platform or a few voices in America who have other platforms that disagree with me. Well, my thought is this, if you come on my platform, it's okay if we agree to disagree, but we should always leave friends, and I think that's the theme of America, of what patriotic citizenship together should be like. But that's what I did. I went out and I focused in other places. And I give my little 10-second segments of feed or my 10-minute segments of feed into the narration because it protects me. And one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to do, and God, I maybe I shouldn't say this because it'll probably happen tonight. I've been able to avoid the adversary of the enemy. For 2.5 years, I've been bitching and screaming and giving disclosure on so many things that tie together of how we would come to this and what's to be expected in the future. And I told people 2 years ago, and not because I was a prepper, but because I wanted people to understand the theory of believe in the unbelievable. And now people are coming to me like, the Christian channel saying, hey, Mike, wow, you did really hit that nail on the head. And I none of the food got wasted. And now we know to stay more on top of it. So when I hear something like that they have an extra 30 days in food always in their house, the message worked. It may not be fruitful enough. We may need 6 months in food. We don't know. When they start to orchestrate this next wave of their push, have you heard this push that we are going to run into more food shortages and gas will hit another, as soon as we deplete our millions of barrels of oil that Trump got for pennies on the dollar, once they deplete that, I mean, we're going to be back to this other narrative of issue because nothing that they do magnifies or justifies anything that makes any correction for anything that they're trying to protect of everything that they've destroyed because they have no good intentions to do it. But when they do it, the failure comes with it and the narrative changes every morning. And that's where the manufactured vaccination of media comes in back into place.
I do want to go into the realm of cryptids and things like that, but I believe that it's worthy to say that we have let's stop pretending, America. Let's just stop doing that. All right. Wouldn't it be? Hold on, I gotta tell this person no. Whoever this is that's calling me, and it's not popping up.
That's cool.
I know not to move from this window because if I do, it'll mess up our whole connection. Sorry. I know you can hear that, right?
Yeah, we'll let it pass. It's no big deal. We'll let it pass. We'll let it pass.
I can back out and come back if you want me to.
It's up to you. Will they just go away or?
There it went. Okay.
See? It's one of those things, man. I don't know. It's one of those things. Well, it just go away and it goes away.
When we look at the way that the structure in front of us, right? Okay, so you pay for gasoline 3 times before it's in your car. You pay for the refinement, whether it's sweet or crude or whatever. And most of that does take place on international oil rigs where there's no taxes to the person that's receiving your tax dollars. They are not taxed on it because they cannot be, because they're in international waters. So that's their paycheck that you're paying for, and that's the refinement of the oil. So then you pay for it again when you put it in your car at the pump. And we're all supposed to believe that every weekend, just magically, every weekend of my life, that this is an honest market, that the price of gas depends upon the price of a barrel, but every weekend it goes up. Every weekend? Really? Right. Every weekend of my life? That doesn't make any sense. That has nothing to do with discovery. That has nothing to do with extraction. That has nothing to do with refinement. This is a cartel. This is a lie. Just like the lottery systems, just like the taxation system. Wouldn't it be nice to have a governing body that didn't believe that they had a right to your body in any kind of a way, that there was no governmental interest in injecting you in anything? Wouldn't that be nice if we had a government that believed that they had no right to spray the air with what the hell ever, because that's unconscionable and completely immoral and probably most likely evil? That, wouldn't it be nice, just to be able to have the reasonable expectation of a body of governance that says, I'm not going to use this technology to violate any of your privacy, because I don't want that to happen to me, and I don't want to live in a place like that. I know that this is the idealistic view. However, as it turns out, the idealistic view is the only view that has ever had our best interest at heart. Every other view has a form of critique or way of selling us short. So maybe it's time to start to really investigate what that idealistic view is, and why is it unattainable, and what logic says that it is unattainable, and is that backed by what? Because if it sells us short, if it tells us, well, that's the way it is, or that's the way it's been, then maybe you've forgotten that you're here, you're alive, and that's with purpose and reason. That you shouldn't be just content to live your life by the thumb of dead man's rules. What are you thinking? You're here to create and manifest. You're here to cultivate. You're here to make a difference. You're here to be something. You're here to do something, and just stop squandering your time because of the rules that have been in place by people who don't give a damn about you and don't give a damn about anyone you love. I think natural curiosity is what brings us into the political realm just as much as it does for us to investigate UFOs, right? I believe I grew up with a physics major. He was a scientist for John F. Kennedy Space Center. And as a natural curiosity, kid that's naturally curious, I asked him about aliens. I asked him about UFOs. And
well, you promise me you can never ask me
that I can never ask you.
Yeah.
What about UFOs?
Yeah, you can never ask me.
I'm living on the wild side. I'm just going to ask.
Yeah.
I'll
be honest with you. I'll give you my analogy of it and tell you that they are fact.
Okay.
I will tell you that they are fact, and we are, and not even more than fact. We probably have some.
So, as a scientist that is speaking to his child at the time, his stepchild, he answers things through probability, logic, and hypothesis. So mathematically, if you take that wall behind you, make it a completely solid wall of drywall, take a pin and then poke a little hole into the wall right in the dead center if you want, and every bit of that hole is the planet Earth and everything that we are able to observe that's 200, 300, 400 million light years away through Hubble or whatever. That's the observable universe. The rest of the wall is the universe that we're pretty sure is still expanding. So the probability states that alien life is an absolute must. It just probability states that there's zero chance that we are the only living intelligent life. Now, let me confuse everybody even further. I am a Christian who loves Jesus Christ. I am also somebody who believes that my creator, God, wouldn't stop at us. I think it makes all the sense in the world to keep creating. That just makes sense to me. That, you would make other planets, you would make other universes, there would be other people, places, and things. What we have been taught here, it applies to us here. That's us. That's what we should be doing to find ourselves closer to God. And this is where we are doing it.
I have to interrupt you or I'll lose my brain fog. it will come down hard on me. You reminded me I want to light a cigarette too. What if our creators are truly somebody that our creator created? So let's say that God didn't have his direct hands in it, but somebody that he created had their direct hands in it. So they seeded the earth. And that would go into the possibility or hypothesis that the Anunnaki were from God, sent here, created by God, and then played part in this evolution, which, by the way, we know even Darwin's theory of evolution was paid for by the Rockefellers. I wonder why that was.
I'm absolutely shocked. Get out of here.
You shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, you have to figure that, Darwin wasn't, and I hate to say this, but Einstein too, neither of them were as impressive in their time as they were after they died. It was like they kept getting, like, their fame just grew and grew and grew, but even in their own time, they felt that they were unimpressive. So, our
governments gave them pedestals, but I think the true factor is if we had any hero at all, anybody that understood history, technology, and I'll bring that into the focus. There's a place in Egypt where there's a sarcophagus that you can't, it's unimaginable how that this thing even got into the room, because it makes no sense. Mathematically, it doesn't fit in any way, and it wasn't carved from the room. But in this room, when you go in to look at it, there's a hole in the wall. And right where the hole in the wall is, if you look at the sun and it comes across, and now we're not talking about focusing on any way where the sun comes into solstice and all these kinds of things. We're not talking about that. Some type of energy came through that wall or went out that wall that came from the sarcophagus or got into the sarcophagus, because granite does not get heated and burned, but something warped it, some type of energy. And we also know in this same temple, if you go into the lower structures, constructs of it, there's still ancient light bulbs and wiring hanging down, and it wasn't there by men. It was there by some men, something, someone. But the importance of it is they all had also these little Stargate things on them, like portals. Like they were using these like Michael Jackson used to do once upon a time when he would go into these iceless chambers with the oxygen and go into his DMT ritual states or whatever he was doing. And it's the best way to explain it, because a lot of people knew how Michael was. He wanted to go into this. He had this type of like mechanism made out of some type of plexiglass or glass that he would go, this chamber he would go in. And it kind of correlates to that when you talk about things like that, that how technology and how early it really was here. And Tesla, I think, played a factor, a key component to information because of where he was born, who he knew, who loved him, who was funding him, until he became a threat, of course. When the threat to give to the mankind took from the man's pocket, nobody wanted to fund him anymore. And of course, technologies, who else but President Donald J. Trump's own uncle in a deep state project went in and removed all Tesla's trunks.
Yeah, imagine that. As an elderly man, he passes away, and when his family goes in, it may have been his daughter, she finds that a bunch of his papers and things are missing. And but I think to the larger point, it was Eric von Daniken who wrote.
Man.
And before that, it was there was I have it here. I can't remember the name of it. It's Ancient Gods or something like that.
Oh, the book.
But it was the one before the Chariot of the Gods. It was Ancient something, and from that book I'm quoting where he says there is more proof on the surface of the earth, whether underwater or above water, to prove the existence of any one of man's monotheistic religions. And as a Christian, it brings me great joy to say that we have a lot to show that, because we're a heavily scrutinized religion where, we a lot of people throw a lot of flack our way. And so we've had to show for generations, like, no, this actually happened. It was here, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's actually helped to prove a lot of the stories, which has been nice. But it's a fact. It's an absolute fact. The temple that you mentioned, let's think about Titicaca. There's one. Göbekli Tepe, man. Listen, that site is still freaking people out. They're still finding stuff there. That's an incredible place. And I was amazed that it wasn't completely destroyed during the war, but thank God it wasn't. And so we can see ancient technology that far surpasses our own. We can see archaeological sites that really do look like they show the existence of giants, and I mean big ones. And then you look into a lot of the oral tradition stories that talk about not just giants, but they talk about different types of giants, and they talk about them at different heights. That there was one that was standing in the ocean, and in the deepest part, it only came to his waist. This was talked about by the native peoples of the Solomon Islands, I believe. And they talked about different giants that like this one race was so out of sync with nature that you could kill them by shoving dirt in their mouth. But they also were imbued with incredible powers. And the fallen angels coming down and mating with the women and teaching them charms and all of this, that seems to be what happened. For me, those things don't negate what was written for me. You know what I mean? Not in any kind of a way. Uh, where I think a lot of people may have issue with that. I really don't. The
I think the issue that comes up with that, and I'm not in disagreement with you, is the fact that we're talking about angelics who could do this. But then when we reflect to what a succubus can do, how does that narrate? How can a demon appropriate with a human, and yet we look at an angelic that can't? What is the difference between the two? They're very similar because they cease to exist in our reality. They take up no space. They're spiritual, but yet they're here. But how does this sexual act?
I'm actually glad that you asked that, because so before I was a Christian, I was brought up in the occult, and that was what I knew was old German Teutonic, basically Satanism, and so
Well,
those
that
were the
sounds like the
principles.
Book of Nemicron to me.
No, I think that's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, isn't it?
Could be the Egyptian Book of the Dead. There's a few
Egyptian,
of
yeah,
them. We
yeah,
can
somebody's
cross
Book of the
reference.
Dead.
We'll take notes, but it's everything that the Bible does. If you go to if you look at the Book of Enoch and you go to the Book of Job and Daniel and the letter from Paul to Timothy, on he even mentions on different in different ways different DNA things, and that we should just not take them into accountability. That things are as of nature calls for.
Yeah,
Because as you
so
said, there are so many different sizes. I think there was 9 races of giants that are written upon. Some that were tall blonde, some that were dark mangly brown hair, some were redhead blue eyes, some had different statues. Then you have what the was it the oh David Goliath and his brothers. They were some of the last of the giants that were written about, so-called written about. Not that they didn't still continue to exist. That's where the Indians come in and talk about the wild man. And it wasn't that they were talking about Bigfoot. It wasn't that they were talking about Bigfoot. They were actually talking about the fact that these Rathalim were decreasing in size because they were losing their genealogy. The strength of the gene that created them was changing. At the
right.
beginning, they were even before that this superficial whatever occurred between the fallen ones and the daughters of man. You had much taller, and I think these were the actual ancient builders and people with technology, because it fits the bill in a way
Yeah,
when you think about. And it answers so many questions, because if you could
yeah.
understand a size of a 450-foot man, he could pick up a 70-ton block with no problem. If you do the math, look at what an ant can do. Do the math. Why couldn't a man do the same?
So the Bible says that um, there there were giants, and
Giants
that
among us in those days.
this he called them an abomination, and it references, I believe, and I'm not sure where it is exactly, but I believe it references that they were eating people, and that's why he found it as an abomination.
Right.
Now, this is interesting, right? Because uh, if you go when the angels were actually in heaven and they were looking down at the daughters of men, they found them to be wretched. And so, to say the least, they didn't find them attractive. When they were out of God's presence and they were down here, they saw them differently for whatever reason. And there are different manners of angels. You have cherubim, right, that are no
Yeah.
longer allowed to be alone because they find themselves to be beautiful. You have seraphim. You have the archangels, right? So you have different classes. You have different manners, and those third of the angels that were sent, I'm sure, comprised of different classes of angels. So depending on what class of angel it was that mated with the woman, would depend on what type of Nephilim that was born. And to me, this validates exactly what God said, because if you look, whether it's in present day Samaria, whether it's in the giant in Afghanistan, the giants that were said to be here in the Americas that were talked about by, I think, the Chippewa, um, or maybe the Shawnee or Pawnee or something like that.
They do talk about the builder mounds, which were the grave sites of the giants. I think that's part of where that narrative was from, but I could be wrong.
They all say that, and they all describe them the same too. And it's not like these folks could call each or email each other or anything. They had 2 rows of teeth, 6 fingers on each hand and foot, and they ate people. And so the tribes had to smoke them out in caves. They would block them in and barricade them, and then catch it on fire. And
right.
There was just different things that were done. This was a fact of life, and it was carried down everywhere. I mean, it's amazing where you find these stories existing, and then you find these claims that the Smithsonian has been hiding information from us for generations, that they have incredible archaeological finds there, that the Vatican is somewhat jealous of what they have in their possession. And
NASA has interest in all these most desirable areas of the finds. Believe it or not, they have ownership interest, even in pyramids like the King's Chamber. It's owned by NASA. If you go out into the desert through what's it called, Giza, I'd say about 10 miles out. I just heard this the other night too, that I was enlightened to this. NASA has a complex out there. What are we doing out there in the middle of the desert? And the Grand Canyon, where the Smithsonian stepped in because of an archaeological find of giants and a different culture that was in America with treasures and trophies beyond anyone's wildest dreams and desires. They own it. You can't go into these areas. They're suppressed areas. They're all black helicopters. They come, they swoop right down. And I know for a fact that it does occur. I know a couple people who just went on a trip who told me about this a few years ago. The minute you're out of leaving the jurisdiction of where these signs are, you're going to have an issue. Same when we go into national parks now, where you see brown and yellow signs. You'll find sometimes a parking lot in the middle of a national forest, and it has all white cars that consist with UN stickers across the plate area.
We had a sitting president that said there were people here operating by the use of covert means.
Right.
And then he, not so suspiciously, said that he'd like to take the Central Intelligence Agency and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And then he was killed. We know that there are people in powerful positions operating in secret. We know that they want to suppress information. We could speculate the reasons all day long, but they love keeping us in an ignorant position for whatever reason. Something that cannot be taken away from me, even though part of me wishes it could be. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And you know how sometimes when it snows and then the wind blows, it has that real cool, like wavy effect on the road as it goes. And it's like, yeah, it looks cool. Well, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what the snow is doing. And it's cold, brother. I mean, it's cold. And I turn a left onto this road. And, there's those little strips of guardrail that'll run where there's a drain pipe underneath the road, but like a huge drain pipe that you could walk through easily. So there's guardrail on either side of the road, and it's got the reflectors. And as I'm looking down the road, I notice that the reflectors are the side of them is being obstructed from my view. And it doesn't make sense because from my view, it's going like this, and that should not happen. Those reflectors on the guardrails are built for your headlights so that they reflect back to your eyes. Should not be a moving obstruction right there. So it definitely caught my eye immediately. And I'm thinking, all right, I got to slow down. There's probably a deer up there. I watched whatever this was with what looked like it had backwards knees, crossed the road and in both of the berms, and did so in about 4 strides. And then by the time I got up to it, because it crosses the road, and then I get up to it and it stopped on the side of the road and looked at me. Well, I thought that because on that right there where it went, they were doing construction. They were building buildings there, and they had a little mound of dirt that was like a couple of feet, maybe 3 feet. Just the day before, and so it was 4 o'clock in the morning. At 7:30, with the sun up, I drove back by there, and there was no mound of dirt, and whatever that was every bit of 9 foot tall. Now it had backwards knees, and I could tell that its fur was matted. But that's all I could tell. And it did look like a dog or a wolf or something like that, or maybe Bigfoot, something like that. But it had backwards knees. It's what it looked like. And I've never been able to get it out of my mind. At the time, I was with my oldest daughter's mother, and she is a sketch artist. So you can just describe something to her, and she can actually draw what it is that you describe, and also from her questions. It's crazy. And so I just described to her what I saw. She drew exactly what I saw. And it looks like a damn werewolf. So I thought this was crazy. And I really hated the fact that I was having that experience. My neighbor was on the phone, or heard me on the phone, describing this to one of my friends. And he asked me where I was, and he had a lot of local knowledge. He said, well, the farmers there are all produce farmers now, and have been for years, because if they've tried to have livestock, something kills it. It will kill everything at night, and only when it's cold out. And when I saw what I saw, and then I had maybe another, not even a quarter mile to the stop sign. As soon as I got to the stop sign and made a right, there was a deer right there. Almost like the universe was telling me, like, bro, you did not see a deer just now. That was not a deer. You cannot make that up, that it was like somehow a deer in your mind. That is not the case. And so so I saw that deer. I go to the stop sign. I turn around. I don't see it when I pass again, but there's a shopping center on the right. And I see a cop. And I pulled the cop over, dude. And I run up to his window, and I didn't really know what to say to the guy. He looked at me like I was some kind of a freak. And I said, dude, do you get reports out here of strange animals or anything like that? He said no. And I got back in my truck and I left. But dude, so now if you look up, there's a video that says werewolf in Brazil that was caught on CCTV footage. I found that years ago, and that's exactly what I saw. I mean, probably a smaller version, but that's exactly what I saw. So think about this. These things exist in Brazil and Ohio at the very least, right? Which is a pretty damn good expanse. The fact that government, with all of their satellite technology and all of the, reconnaissance and everything that they do, and everything they know about land and land values and minerals and resources and where gas, supply is, and all of this, are we supposed to believe that they don't know these things exist?
LiDAR was actually created to find them.
What was?
LiDAR.
Nice.
That was the first part of the segment of what LiDAR was for, and then it went into deep ground penetrating. And if I could just jump for a minute, we are seeing multi-levels of cities in Egypt now with this, because the technology has even gotten that much better. But that was the format of what it was for. And we do know that money through the government has been appropriated into the research and development of dogmen, cryptids, Bigfoot, etc. Look at Mount St. Helens, what happened up there when that occurred. We have search and rescue out the butt in every state. We don't call military in for nothing. It wasn't that catastrophic. It was an isolated event around an isolated area. The military went in to do the cleanup because of the reports of what was found. Big, large, hairy men, big like dog creatures. If you go between the lakes in Alabama and a couple other places, or B. Moss, she's a friend of mine. She brings on a lot of dogmen, Bigfoot people. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of very good scientific information is coming out just on tons of different platforms. Jimmy Church, Jimmy has some of the most credible people that you could ever desire to have on a platform. But he's been, radio broadcasting now podcasting, through his teeth for the past 25 years. He's in movies. He's doing all these great things. Hats off to you, James Church. One day we'll play the guitar together. But anyway, just phenomenal information. These things do exist, but they're suppressed. And I want to bring this up, if it makes any sense to you. We hear about gates and modifications to the flea, the tick, the moth. They're releasing mosquitoes, creating different spiders. They're creating GMO seedings. They're also trying to recreate past history and lives. They are, as far as I'm concerned, from what I know. Why would you have underground cities and national forests with United Nations cars in parking lots with no buildings in sight? So there's some way to get in somehow. Something going on, some type of research, some type of technology. Could they be doing something, releasing them? And then it makes me even wonder, to go a step further, and I don't want to get too theoretically crazy here. You hear about some people going missing, but being found in places farther away. Not in a majority of the cases alive, but shouldn't have been there. They had no way to travel this far, but mysteriously get 5 miles away. And then you have thousands and thousands of people who do go missing. Where do they vanish to? Is Bigfoot a watcher who's just trying to tell us stay out of the woods? There's something bad going on in here. I mean, I'm just saying,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like to speculate too. The natives here in Ohio said that Bigfoot was a shapeshifter, and he was in charge. He was the one that reported to some higher ups about the planet and its inhabitants. So they also talked about having an accord with Bigfoot and other creatures, and at one point in time just having a falling out, and they no longer trust him, is what they said. Remember when the Puritans landed in New York, and this was their first accord that they had with the native peoples. The native peoples were trying to, they were asking about the land and everything, and the native peoples were trying to, help them to get acclimated as best as they could. And they said, there's something you have to worry about, and it's these little people, little creatures, stand about 2 foot tall, and they called them Pukwudgies. And immediately, because these were Puritans, they were telling this to. The Puritans said, well, those are the foot soldiers of Satan. And these little creatures can turn themselves, make themselves where they're unseen whenever they want. They can make themselves visible. And they used to work alongside man, was their story, and had a falling out and no longer, work together or anything. But those were the stories that the early settlers were told. Just, one of the stories that they were told about these lands and some of the things in them. So when we see things like the Spiderwick Chronicles, that main character that can be invisible and things like that, that's where that comes from. That's a Pukwudgie. When we see things like men, like Beauty and the Beast, where a bunch of men got torches and they went out into the woods to go and get some savage beast, that's real. That's actually real. That happened thousands of times over and over again, because there are things that are transcendent to what it is that we understand. I've read and I've heard stories about our own special forces being sent into places here in the United States after, beasts and other places as well. So, I think that to count those things out, when we see and hear all of the stories that talk about those things that transcend cultures, you have stories of the Yeti, right, that are in places that could not have been in communication with the native peoples here, and they have the exact same description except for the color. So how does that happen? Same thing for mermaids, same thing for trees that move, trees that can walk. Then you see that in the Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings and Star Wars both are plagiarized stories. Those were in no way original. Some of them are taken from the Indian epic, the Mahabharata. Some of
Yeah.
it, and then the fighting styles were taken from actual like Japanese and Chinese fighting styles. They were just plagiarized stories from beginning to end. It was the story of Tiamat, and so the powerful believe in those things, but they don't want you believing in them. They want you
Right.
believing that Excalibur is legend, because then, or myth or folklore, because then you're not going to go searching for anything. They're not competition in looking for Solomon's ring or the Spear of Destiny or
You're right. You're right.
yeah.
They want their hands on everything. And I know about the Indians, and to take you back even a little from the Puritans, Leif Erikson actually had in his memoirs that he encountered Bigfoot and this from through the indigenous when he arrived in the Americas. So there's things. I mean, even if you and go off base there for a minute and talk UFO, Christopher Columbus. Not that he discovered America, but let's just concentrate on the fact. In his memoirs of out on the ship in the water, where they encountered light ships going underwater. So
Yeah.
and then you have the was it the Brazilian waters event where they found they were looking, there was a ship out there looking for a wine ship because they knew the bottles would be like treasures. It'd be 1100, 1200 years old. And they're sending down sonar signals and they come up with a UFO craft that looks like it's petrified stone. It is not a stone. It is all hand carved something, or all by hands, man made, or someone's hands, and deep in the water. So you have these analogies of these different facts. You're right. Even when certain tombs were found, when Hillary was in office with Barack, she was one of the first ones that had to be contacted to see what was in the tomb. And talking about certain parts of giants and things going on, the Kandahar giant, reports of that, LA, Missouri. I mean, some of the best speakers that we have, biblical and that narrate with hypothesis of different scenarios that we're talking about. He sat with these military guys. He heard their stories of this Kandahar. I don't know if you know that story, but
Yeah.
that was pretty devastating what our soldiers went through there when they encountered this being. So are they still amongst us? Do they still live in these caverns that go and what we some call Agarthia, which comes from the flat earth, hollow earth sequence of what some people's beliefs are? I don't know.
Well, did I freeze? Did I freeze or did you freeze? I feel like I can never tell. Let's see. I'll go to the chat. Brazilian Navy also filmed a USO while they were patrolling the Brazilian coastline. Am I frozen? Or is he frozen? Or are both of us frozen? Oh, somebody's chatting there. Oh, you can hear me? All right, cool. He's frozen. All right, well, hopefully Mr. Anthony can get back. StreamYard will do that to the host sometimes, and it's unfortunate. But if he just reloads and comes back, he'll be good to go again. I don't know. I appreciate the conversation tonight, man. What do you guys think? Has this been enjoyable for you? I see a lot of participation in the chat, man. And it's like for everything we bring up, there's another 10 things to be said by each of us, so oh, they can see and hear me both. All right, cool. Well, hopefully Mr. Anthony will make it back here soon. Until then, if I have the floor, UFOs are probably real. Probably. You know what I mean? Just coming from a scientist that I grew up with. Doesn't freak me out, doesn't make me think any less of God or anything. My God's a creator God. That's a good point. NASA has the recorded constellation of what the stars were doing that explain and tell the story of Jesus's birth. If you don't know that, look into that. That's super cool. Think about the ancient story of Tiamat, right? Where basically our ancient ancestors were fleeing a war, and they went to the planet, set up what looked like a civilization, but was actually hiding on the third rock from the sun. The people who were chasing them showed up, blew up the planet, and left. And if you look at our asteroid belt today, it's actually been scanned and pictured by satellites. And if you take all of those rocks and put them together, sure enough, it looks like you get a ball with a hole, like the Death Star on Star Wars. Freaking weird, right? I mean, that's the strange thing. We don't want that to be true, but it is, and it's weird. And now you have to live with that information just like I do. I really did see a fuzzy backward need thing. And part of me wishes I didn't, because now I have to live the rest of my life knowing that I saw that thing. And what are the chances, right, that a backward need NBA player is just walking in a like a werewolf suit at 4 o'clock in the morning in the bone frigid cold? I have to live with that for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, no answers. I have hunted in the forest in Ohio. I have hunted in the woods in Ohio. This happened when I was driving my truck. How much sense does that make? Sit in the woods for hours. You know what I mean? Nothing crazy. Driving my truck just outside of Columbus, and man, I'll never get it out of my head. I'll never get it out of my head. So that really happened. I think it's important to be open-minded. I think it's important to look at all of these things. My own Bible says that the giants existed, and I do believe that giants have and maybe probably still do exist. And I believe we have to be open to these things. I believe that if you, it's like this for me. If you can entertain that you've been lied to, if you can entertain that your government censors information and sells you short just on any one level, like a political level or the lack of education, then why wouldn't that apply across the board logically? That especially if they found old information, they would do everything they could to stifle you from getting that, because if they broaden your horizons, then what happens is maybe you'll start to think outside of the boxes that they've tried to keep you in. If you start to find out that mermaids, Bigfoot, werewolves, whatever they are, that they're freaking real, that these things actually exist or existed, then you start to change, the narrative where they've had complete control on nothing fantastic. It's all meant to be in Pirates of the Caribbean movies and otherwise not believed. Oh, okay, maybe it's not. I can't take that message. I think I'm getting a message from Mr. Anthony, but I'm not able to do that because if I do that, then it'll kick me out of here. So maybe, oh, yeah, I would love to, I want to go through the chat and talk to you guys and stuff, but I don't want to just take over his stream. That's not cool. So I will hop off of here and bid all of you farewell and good night. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. I enjoyed this, and hopefully Mr. Anthony will have me back. And maybe once I get out of here, then he can get back on. I'm not sure. So thank you guys. Thank you guys. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation and the dialogue tonight. And if I can shamelessly plug the Freemen Report, the Freemen, MEN, Freemen Report on YouTube. That's a really easy place to find me Sundays at 5 o'clock Eastern. Myself and another gentleman. And so check me out. And maybe Mr. Anthony got in here. There we go. Thank you, man. He said, thank you, JD. All right. Yeah, no, I don't want to take over your stream, brother. So I'm not exactly sure how that happened. That's really weird that it would just do that all of a sudden you're not here. Really weird, man. Yeah, Jeff Strong said, hang on unless you want to go. It's late. I'm going to hop off here. I got to cook dinner and we've got shrimp and Alfredo and garlic bread. So I got to get on that. And man, you guys have a good night. Thanks for being here. Be easy.